are so excited to welcome you to our 26th annual Connection Series. We are bringing industry leaders together to share a vision of the future of technology in the home. After 2 years of virtual events, we are also announcing the return of our in-person events in 2022. We hope you join us in May as we gather again for impactful sessions with insights from industry leaders and best-of-class research from Parks Associates analysts. Nothing beats the knowledge, conversations, and community that come from meeting in person. Throughout this year, we will gather and share Parks Associates' latest research on smart home devices and solutions for consumers. We survey 10,000 broadband households each quarter to provide the most reliable and accurate view of the market. The connected home has evolved from a high-end concept toward a mass market opportunity with incredible revenue potential. Today, several high-profile market disruptions are emerging as a result of broadband adoption, smartphone usage, and consumer expectations for connectivity solutions that provide a personalized experience. This year, Connections addresses the use cases and emerging business models that will successfully engage consumers and grow revenues in the converging IoT industries, including smart home, connected entertainment, and mobile ecosystems. Thank you again for joining us at Connections.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Connections. The topic of today's event is broadband future-proofing, driving new experiences and value. If you haven't met me before, I'm Kristen Hannick, Research Director at Parks Associates. I cover the broadband and MDU spaces, including our custom and syndicated research, really taking a look at some of the very exciting trends we're seeing right now in the smart apartment and smart building spaces. In terms of the agenda for today, we have some great information and discussion prepared, talking about some of the exciting developments in the overall broadband market, the MDU space, and with smart home services in particular. I will be sharing some of Parks Associates' own research and insights into the broadband and smart MDU markets, which will be followed by a panel discussion on the topic of broadband services and MDUs. We have a great lineup of panels here today, including representatives from Plume, Smart One Solutions, Cox Communications, and AirTies. Afterwards, we'll be going into a fireside chat with GVTC Communications, an internet service provider from right here in Texas, followed by another panel discussion on the topic of smart home strategies, looking at the transition to services, again with a great lineup of panelists, including Calix, Sweeper, Blink Charging, OnTech Smart Services, and Brevo. Before heading into my presentation, I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors for helping to really make this event possible. A special thanks to Alarm.com, Calix, Cox Communities, F-Secure, Homebase, Plume, AirTies, Bitdefender, Johnson Controls, NICE, Notion, Rapid Response Monitoring, Residio, Schneider Electric, Status, AmTrust Warranty and Specialty Risk, Gagion, Avani, Medea, Cooktop Safety, Iris, and Assurant. And also a special thank you to our industry supporters and media partners. Also, I'd like to take a minute to mention next month's event. In November, we will be hosting another session on tech innovation and new partnerships in the smart home industry. And as a reminder, you do also have access to the full series of recorded events from earlier this year through the SwapCard platform. Finally, if this is your first time interacting with us, welcome. You should know that Parks Associates is an independent market research firm that specializes in emerging consumer technology. And you'll see some of our research throughout our sessions and presentations today. So please let us know if we can help guide your strategic decision-making and product planning in any way. So yes, let's get right into it. I'm going to be taking the next few minutes to discuss some of the trends we're seeing in terms of broadband in the future, taking a look at overall macro trends impacting the broadband market, as well as what we're seeing in terms of smart MDU solutions and smart apartment solutions. One of the biggest trends that I'm sure you're all familiar with or have heard of is that there has been a massive growth in the adoption of internet at home over the past few years. According to Parks Associates survey data and estimates, we have seen that broadband penetration as a whole has increased by about 5 percentage points since 2019. This has been an equivalent of around 12 million new households. This was driven by a number of factors, the biggest of which is, of course, the pandemic. We saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic, many people realized that internet was vitally important to them. They needed it in order to do many of their activities of daily lives, so enable a lot of streaming video use cases, the large number of connected devices that they had in their homes, and for really these vital activities they had to do in terms of utility, in terms of remote work, in terms of being connected and informed and entertained. We saw that during this time, the percentage of Americans that were mobile only decreased. Households that were unconnected became connected. We also saw record household formation caused by lots of younger folks with excess cash, mainly through student loan deferrals, but also through increased income and wages. They're moved out onto their own for the first time. In 2022, we've seen a little bit of a slowing of the broadband net additions. There are many different reasons for this. One of which is that a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been picked. There was a record addition of new households gaining internet access over the past few years. Lots of the people who were going to get internet have already done so. We've also seen that there is increased competition from some new market entrants. We have seen the launch of 5G home internet services from T-Mobile and Verizon. We have seen new greenfield fiber players enter the market, including electric utilities and small local players. We've also seen the emergence of some large players backed by investor groups, including Brightspeed and Eston Broadband. This new emergence of these players has increased pressures at both the low and high ends of the market. We're also seeing, with rising inflation, a slower rate of new household formation than in the past, and fewer consumers overall moving and triggering these new service subscriptions. So it's certainly been a little bit more of a challenging environment this year than in previous years. However, the overall market remains highly positive for broadband providers. During the pandemic, as I mentioned, consumers learned how important home internet is to their lives, for entertainment, for convenience, and for utility. And this is not a lesson that's easily undone. Consumers need fast, reliable broadband speeds to support their lifestyles. Remote work in particular is an enduring trend that looks to be here to stay. Parks Associates has surveyed US internet households on this topic really since the start of the pandemic, looking at the percentage of households working remotely on a full-time basis and on a hybrid basis. While full-time remote work has decreased compared to last year, we see that hybrid remote work is actually above where it was during the height of the pandemic, being driven, of course, by more and more consumers actually returning to the workforce. As of the third quarter of this year, some 41% of US internet households report working at least on a hybrid basis remotely. These remote working households, typically higher earning households, are very desirable tenants for MDUs in particular. MDUs have, of course, been using high broadband speeds and connectivity features in order to attract these residents and to attract tenants overall. This includes offering high-speed internet and reliable broadband, as well as more advanced amenities such as property-wide resident VLANs. Imagine, if you will, being able to work remotely at your apartment pool and printing a document straight to the printer in your own unit, using your own home network. We also see that broadband overall is serving as a vital backbone within these communities, not just of connectivity, but also enabling what we're seeing with smart apartment and smart MDU deployments. And I just hinted at it a little bit, but another trend that I should mention is that of increasingly high device ownership among households. From the start of the pandemic until today, the average internet household has added roughly 4 new connected devices to their homes and their persons. These devices include a wide mix of products, mostly what we would call consumer electronics devices, so computers, smartphones, smart speakers, smart TVs, and so on and so forth. But we're also seeing a measurable increase in adoption of smart home devices, with the average US household now owning a mean average of 3 smart home products. This new product adoption is a good indicator of consumers' overall priorities, with many, of course, seeing a good deal of value in smart home use cases. MDUs are being quick to recognize this trend. We see growing adoption and interest in smart MDU solutions. For resident use, of course, to increase ROI through rent and amenity fees, to attract and retain desirable residents, such as remote workers, and to better differentiate properties from competitors. But we're also seeing the use of some of these solutions for internal use. As I'm sure you're all aware, there has been a worker shortage in the United States for some time now. This shortage has hit many industries, including MDUs, where many remain understaffed. To solve this challenge, MDUs have turned to smart technology to improve their operational efficiency and to more effectively manage resources and staff. MDUs have also leveraged smart technology to improve staff and resident safety and to enable new use cases. Some of the top solutions are listed on the left of the screen here. In-unit automation, smart cameras and access control solutions, smart parking, maintenance solutions, including smart appliances and sensors such as water leak detectors, and also a wide number of energy management solutions. As I mentioned before, the network backbone is really essential for smart MDU deployments. It supports resident connectivity, both inside the unit and roaming across the property. It supports staff connectivity, wherever and however staff need to connect. It also supports IoT devices and the wealth of new use cases I just mentioned. However, one key challenge that many existing brownfield MDUs face is that their networks were never designed for this kind of work. They face many potential logistical challenges, including high levels of interference from resident Wi-Fi networks, dead spots from building material choice, and many very important decisions around the deployment type that MDUs want to use, whether they should make use of wireless versus wired technologies, and really who pays for this connectivity. We have our next panel discussion coming up to discuss some of these trends and more, but I do see some questions coming in from the audience that I have a few minutes to tackle. So I will attempt to answer some of these right now. So we have one question in asking how big is the wireless connectivity problem, and with certain types of MDUs have more or less problems. I would say it is fairly common for brownfield MDUs, depending on where exactly these properties are geographically located. For garden-style properties, it's usually pretty easy for them to be able to have this type of wireless connectivity. So they tend to be fewer types of the concrete, fewer types of wire mesh than we would see in maybe high-rises or even mid-rise properties. I'd say greenfield, of course, is very much easier space to deploy, but brownfield is a much, much larger market. So it looks like there is another question in talking about the speed graph I showed earlier as well. I'd say that that is consumer-reported speeds that they actually receive, and not necessarily what would be about promotional pricing. A lot of that is not necessarily what they need in terms of the use cases, but it is speed is increasingly being used by broadband service providers as a way to better market and attract residents and consumers overall. So there are very few people who do need maybe 500 megabit download speeds just to watch Netflix. But if you have maybe a household of 4 or 5 people and they're all streaming 4K video at the same time, that of course does bump up your usage. All right, I believe that's all for questions from the audience. So we do have, as I mentioned, a panel discussion coming up to discuss some of these very interesting trends going on in the market. So let me turn it over to our own president and CMO, Elizabeth Parks, who is going to be the moderator for the discussion today.
Welcome back. Thank you, Kristen, for that great presentation sharing some of Parks Associates research. I'm Elizabeth Parks, and I'm excited to bring this next conversation forward. There really is so much to talk about, and we're going to jump right in with our panelists today. We're going to be taking questions, so please be sure if you have any questions or comments to put those in the chat or the Q&A box in the SwapCard platform. We have an amazing lineup of speakers joining us from AirTies, Cox Communications, Plume Design, and Smart One Solutions. We're going to be talking about what goals building apartment owners and property managers have for the next 12 to 18 months, looking at what's keeping them up at night, what the requirements are for adding technology into new buildings and retrofitting buildings, what that process looks like, how expectations have changed with where tech is being added beyond just being a value-added service and really becoming a basic part of the infrastructure with a focus on the network. This is going to enable all sorts of services in the future, bringing new value for building owners and property managers, along with great value for those residents and consumers. So we're going to start with brief intros from our speakers who are going to share more about their role and the companies they represent. Thank you all for joining us, and a special shout out to Cox Communications and Cox Communities for their support of our research and events. Vicki, we are going to turn to you first and see if we can get you to do a short introduction, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Great. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Vicki Rogers. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Cox Communities. Our organization within Cox Communications really builds high trust relationships with builders, owners, consultants to really support leveraging technology to support our owners and driving rents, occupancy, and apartment choice. And so our team looks at the external marketplace, builds strategies based on growth and risk mitigation. We build product roadmaps that are specific for the multifamily space. We do operational enablement, and then we have sales organizations that actually manage the ongoing relationships.
Great. So we are very excited to have you here and look forward to the conversation. So David, I'm going to go to you next. David is the Chief Product Officer with Plume. We'll let David introduce himself and Plume.
Hi, folks. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for the opportunity to participate on this distinguished panel. My name is David. I lead all of our product efforts across Plume's portfolio at large. At Plume, we are the creators of the world's largest customer experience management platform for internet service providers. The technologies that we build, basically, we aim them to make it easy for our internet service provider customers to create new experiences and very quickly and rapidly deliver these new experiences to residents, to businesses, and as of this week, to property managers alike.
So thank you so much for joining us. Ted, we'll go with you next. And let's see. Ted, can you hear us okay? Okay, I think, can you hear us okay? We're going to come right back to you, Ted. So let's move along here and see if we've got Scott. So Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Let's see if you can do a quick introduction of your role in AirTies.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Thanks for everybody for joining today. My name is Scott Stinson. I head up sales and business development for the Americas here at AirTies. For those of you who don't know who AirTies is, we deliver both end-to-end managed Wi-Fi platforms for the operators worldwide from tier 1 to tier 3, as well as integration of our controller technology and APIs into over 80 platforms today throughout the world, and some of the largest operators as well worldwide. 35 million homes under management. Again, a wide complementary selection of tool sets and services to our operator partners, and a number of professional services to help back that up.
Okay, let me see if we've got Ted here. Ted, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, I can. I think I can hear you as well. So thanks for joining us, Ted. Let's see if you can do a quick intro.
Everyone, I'm Ted Malucci. I'm the founder of One Solutions.
Hey, Ted, I think we are having a network. I think we are having a network connectivity issue. Yeah, so we're gonna see if we can maybe get a little bit of support there and checking that connection. Quite relevant for our discussion today. So we'll bring you back in here in just a second to do an intro once we can ensure your sound is good there. But I would like to go ahead and start the conversation here, and really start off with what we're talking about. What are building owners and property managers working towards, and what is the immediate need in, let's say, the next 6 months, and then 12 to 18 months, what are they trying to accomplish? And Vicki, I want to start with you on this question, and then we'll look to jump back to Ted and see if we can get an intro from him following this.
Sounds good. We survey and talk live to customers and residents all the time, right? And the key things that we keep hearing from owners is, number one, that obviously an apartment now is not just a place to sleep. It's a home is everything from, working at home, home healthcare, remote learning, etc. And so having always on services, not only inside the apartment, but on the property and common areas is really important. Making sure that reliability and uptime and just the resident experience overall is key. As well as, your researcher had mentioned earlier, the fact that people are having a hard time keeping leasing staff and maintenance staff. Operational efficiencies and digital enablement of the buildings is becoming more and more important, just to really drive operational efficiencies and make the resident journey more frictionless.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does emphasize that role of the building network and, all that can accomplish. So Vicki, just going a little bit deeper into some of the services that you see, coming as a result of the platforms being added to the building, the always on broadband. Are there any examples that you might be able to share in terms of new services that are getting delivered?
Well, obviously the always on solutions is a key winner with both the residents and the owners, and actually drives a 65% apartment choice, which means if someone's looking at one apartment versus an apartment similarly situated across the street, they're going to choose the one with pre-enabled broadband. So that's key. What some of the newer services we've launched is really property IoT. And what that does is it allows the owner to have control when the apartments are open. It's integrated into their back-end property management systems. That way they can control access to the doors, temperature control, know if there's a water leak, manage HVAC or other systems. But when the resident moves in, then that control is given over to the resident so that they have in-home automation to be able to allow the dog walker to come in or to manage their thermostat control, etc. That way you both have the resident who has the automation solutions they're looking for, as well as the property manager who can manage empty apartments.
Yeah, absolutely. And effectively, we're talking about technology becoming a product that is enabling these services. And so, David, I'd like to go to you here in the bigger picture when we're talking about buildings that are enabled, and then this ultimate impact with getting into perhaps a smart city and what that means for the future of consumers living at home. So can you tell us a little bit more about your view of this technology as a product and what that means for building and property managers right now and the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to echo a few remarks that Vicki made because I do agree with them. with a lot of our property manager customers and building owner customers, clearly there's an obvious problem that keeps everyone up at night. It's their commercials, it's the P&L. How do I increase revenues? How do I lower costs? And we're fully in support of all of the initiatives that is going on within Vicky's team there. And we'd like to kind of promote that. I think beyond that, and back to your question, Elizabeth, here at Plume, at least on my team, we're a product team. So what we're constantly thinking about is who is the customer that we're building for? And when we jump into customers' shoes and we start to kind of think about the experiences, that they want in their product, we start to ask ourselves often, what is the product? You could argue 10 years ago, the product could have been, let's say, 4 walls, a rooftop, and an electric socket, right? The amenity at that point in time could have been a gym, and that would have been fine. But in kind of today's world, how we think about the product is, I think there's an evolution to that. And what I mean by that is, of course, the 4 walls, the rooftop, and the electric circuit is there. But we actually think beyond that, from an amenities perspective, heck, it's something that folks actually come to expect is Wi-Fi. And when we say Wi-Fi, I don't want to pick on Ted earlier, but we could see how Wi-Fi is just so instrumental to everything. So for Wi-Fi networks to work and work all the time and work kind of ubiquitously across, let's say, the resident's household versus the kind of like common areas in the MDU, we think that's a big differentiator. And so with us here at Plume, we have 2 products actually that help with kind of this experience. For the residents themselves, we have our mobile app that allows residents to configure Wi-Fi networks, gain parental control, ad blocking, malware blocking, and the like. But then correspondingly, and even more so for the property owners, this week we announced a product called Plume Uprise. And what Plume Uprise does is it allows property owners to now use this technology to create a brand new experience. So for example, we all know and love our connected devices. In the world of connected devices, there's always this concept of easy onboarding of Wi-Fi devices. Oh my gosh, when I open a Wi-Fi device, can it automatically connect to my network? What if we can introduce that same level of frustration-free setup to frustration-free move-in, right? And so in that regard, perhaps, there's a world where when residents enter an MDU building and they sign the lease, maybe they don't have to wait 5 days before they can get their internet. Maybe once they sign their lease, we can get them activated on the spot. And so that's kind of how we think about the role of product in this space. I think there was a time when it was a little bit easier. It was just four walls, a rooftop, and a socket. But nowadays we see it as more of an introduction of new software services that kind of enable new experiences for residents and tenants alike.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely can see how the extension of technology is, it's impacting our lives everywhere, and new solutions being developed when people, see the problems and then want to solve them through the integration of technology. And in the building world, there's so much to talk about. I do want to see if we've got Ted here. So Ted, can you hear
Hopefully
me okay?
now. Yeah,
Okay,
I can hear
great.
you fine.
Yeah, let me go back here and let you introduce yourself real quick. And I'm getting your slide up. Okay, Ted, give us a brief introduction of yourself and Smart One Solutions, and then I'll come to you with the next question about Network as a Service.
Okay, can you flip to the next slide? So my name's Ted Malucci, the founder and president of Smart One Solution. We've built technology that allows us to deploy smart homes in MDU. So this whole discussion that we've been having so far has been talking about networks. What we do is we take the base building network, we extend it up to connect the homes. And in every home, we have a smart home hub. We put a server at the base of the building so we can control the configuration of every unit. So when people move in, it works. We can also remotely update the software in every single suite. That server at the base of the building serves another purpose. It's also a data lake. So it's actually capturing the time event series data of everything that's happening in that community. So we're able to run machine learning and AI against those data sets to be able to create next generation services. So within the suite, you have everything you expect in a smart home: lighting control, blind control, thermostats, smart door locks, leak detection, smoke detection, all of that. But now, because the homes are connected to the base network of a building, They can control the entrances. They can view cameras throughout the building. They're attached to package systems, attached to automated license plate readers. And then the app that's been built is built on a microservices framework where we can now start to put in community-based services. So things at the bottom that you're seeing there are family care, car shares, integrated retail, smart EV charging, all those types of services. Our market model is we actually are selling through large telecoms. We're contracting about 200 buildings. We work in partnership with large telecoms in the MDU space. So that's a bit about what we do.
Glad we could get you on board here. Let me get the next question here to you. Can you talk a little bit more? I mean, you explained a little bit of this network as a service. How are building owners and managers responding to, these solutions that you're putting in front of them?
They're responding very positively. I guess the comment I'd want to make at this point is that, and I'm sure everybody out there can see this, there's a lot of bells and whistles and a lot of froth and a lot of discussion about all these little solutions. Oh, you don't need networks. You can, and there's a lot of movement towards point solutions of put a door lock, put a thermostat, but you really need networks in buildings. And there's networks in commercial buildings. MDU typically follows behind. The infrastructure part's important because a network allows you to connect sensor devices. It allows you to actuate things. Your building can't truly become smart unless there's actually network infrastructure in it. But right now, there's a lot of people out there trying to say you don't need that. So I think the biggest point I'd want to bring out in this whole discussion is think about these networks. That's the fundamental. The fundamental is the network. It's the nervous system of the building. Don't get caught up in all the hype of point solutions because it's not going to scale. And people say technology changes every day. Networks really haven't. Maybe they're faster, but the concept of the network is fundamental to making a building smart and being able to continue to grow your solution in the future.
Yeah, you're bringing a lot of really, really good points in front here, especially that ability to scale. It's one thing to do things in one building, but being able to take that to maybe a portfolio of buildings and then looking at the future with smart cities. Scott, I want to come to you with the next question in terms of the complexity and all that is taking place behind the scenes as far as what's being managed when we talk about all these different devices that are going into homes, as well as in the MDU spaces, the public areas that residents would be using. So can you touch upon some of the things that you're seeing with the complexity of deployments, how these are getting managed, even perhaps how building ownership and services may have to get split somehow, to appeal to different parties, and how that works out?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things we've certainly seen when we look at MDU deployments and Ted touched on this, I think, as well, is the importance of infrastructure. You have to really build your house on a solid foundation. And the MDU environment, I think, brings a lot of significant challenges to both the MDU owner and the operator that's delivering those services inside, particularly because of the brownfield infrastructure. Greenfield's great, right? You can go in with a clean slate and build what you want, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of brownfield out there. So when you start to think about the next generation MDU, we're already seeing 25 gig services being delivered. EPB and Chattanooga is a good example of that. Symmetric multi-gig service and low latency is going to be a requirement. The question becomes, when you think about the existing wiring, coax is an example that sits inside that building. Is it ready for that, right? Can it handle it? So there's a lot of preparation, I think, that both the MDU owner and the operator that's delivering services in that building are going to have to think through. It goes back even to the point around cost, right? Cost is really important. Well, that infrastructure's got to be properly optimized and ready for it, and that's going to bear a certain cost. But it is really important. You can't have that excellent in-home wireless experience if fundamentally the building blocks upon which it sits are not ready for that. And so we really encourage both the operator as well as the MDU owner to be thinking through about how to leverage the existing infrastructure that's there if you can. Technologies like G.hn will help get you to those needs in symmetric gig or above 1 gig service. But we do think that's really important for both the MDU owner and the operator to be thinking about as you move forward.
Well, yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about those owners and operators and the decision-making process. How much do they really know? Do they have a staff that has the wherewithal to be making these decisions, or how much education really are your teams having to do when you go in to sell these solutions? And so, Vicki, let me start with you on this question about who are the decision makers, and do they get it? How much are they going to have to add whole new teams and divisions to incorporate into their own management as they look to the future?
Well, what I would say is I agree with both Ted and Scott that the network and the infrastructure is the most important thing there, right? And so that's the reason our teams have sales engineers that have worked with these customers for 20, 30 years, right? And so we have design and engineering teams. We look at the brownfields to understand what's the current infrastructure, what are they trying to accomplish, what's the mix of work at home, or is there remote home healthcare, et cetera. So we will do the design because there's lots of connectivity solutions, right? There's wireless solutions, there's fiber solutions, there's a million different ways to do it. So the first thing is getting the right infrastructure within the building and that design right, depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish long term. And so these are customized because each building's a little bit different. But what I would also say is it's not just the network in the building. That's important. But if you're not sitting on a core network backbone that can support what you're doing in the building, you're going to have issues anyway, right? Because you can have a great infrastructure in the building, but if you're not tied to a backbone that can support what you're trying to accomplish, especially as things shift. If you think about COVID, we grew data usage and impact to the networks by 5 years and 6 months. You got to make sure you've got an infrastructure on the backbone that will also support that. And so, typically MDUs have not had deep IT teams, right? It's not like commercial spaces as much. They've been a little behind in technology. And so that's the reason that Cox has a Cox Communities team, is so that we have design engineers and specialists and consultants that understand the multifamily space to a deep level, but also understand infrastructure, emerging technology, et cetera. So we come in and do the design and engineering work, and we propose what that looks like. And we usually give them options, right? Because it is a cost factor too. You go into a brownfield and you're redoing a lot of stuff. It's like, here are the cost options, here's the return, here's the risk for both. Also, think about it. Homes today, you were just talking about going from, I think, 11 to 16 devices. Homes today look like what small businesses looked like years ago. And so the same things that mattered to small businesses years ago, when 40% of your residents work from home, are the same. And so security and failover, uptime, troubleshooting and resolution become more and more important. And especially when you have the mix of bring your own devices the apartment owners brought in, as well as, all the complexities inside the apartment. So things have just changed a lot. And without those ID departments, I think that whoever they're working with, they've got to depend on them to bring solutions and design that are going to make them happy long term. And the fact that technology does change, and the willingness to change out the technology with the technology clauses, things change over time. If you've got a 10-year contract, you should have a fresh look clause in there that says if things change, that we're willing to work with someone to change it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of good points there, especially just the general state of how people live and work and the remote play and the impacts there. A lot of this could be said as being driven also by video usage in the home. And so, David, let me go to you and see if you can maybe emphasize that role of the managed network when we consider the congestion that might be being placed on the network that wasn't before, maybe just a few years back.
Yeah, certainly. So I agree with a couple of points that was pointed out by Scott and kind of reiterated by Elizabeth here. Scott mentioned, quote unquote, how do you ensure an excellent in-home experience? So for us, when we started our company, let's say nearly 8 years ago, Wi-Fi was much simpler then. Elizabeth touched on the work from home phenomenon, which I believe is here to stay. There was a time, let's say 7, 8 years ago, heck, even a decade ago, where Wi-Fi just was not as pervasive. And even if it was, the devices that were actually going onto networks weren't bandwidth consuming. Elizabeth touched on earlier, I believe the quote, if I'm not mistaken, was we basically pulled in 5 years of demand kind of on the spot in terms of data consumption. All that speaks to is, if anything, the network has to be even more intelligent today, not less, right? There was a time when, I want to go a little bit technical now, and maybe the audience might not be as interested, but we were talking about the 2.4 gigahertz unlicensed band. And there was a debate as to whether or not we should create devices that operate in both 2.4 and 5.8. And today the debate is, should we create yet another device that goes 2.4, 5.8, and 6 gigahertz? Well, with all of these devices latching onto networks, it's one thing if you're in a single family home and there's wide environments and it's an uncongested area, but when you start having kind of units stacked amongst each other, all of these devices compete for the same airwave. And as a result of that, you need something that's going to actually optimize the network. And so for us, when we thought through this, we saw this problem statement many years ago when we were kind of developing our in-house, let's call them Wi-Fi solutions. And so with Plume Uprise now, what we're doing essentially is twofold with the network optimizer. One, everything is kind of controlled in the backend in the cloud. And then two, once a day, what the cloud looks at is, where are all of these devices in the home, kind of where are they interfering with one another? So it could be one unit versus the other. It could be 2 units versus the MDU's Wi-Fi network. But essentially from the cloud, once a day, we optimize the network such that the performance will be performant. And so in that regard, back to your question on video consumption, it's very clear that work from home drove a tremendous amount of video use cases, from telehealth to clearly calls like this for work, to education, to entertainment demand. And so kind of collectively, I think, if anything, it just screams for more network optimization and not less.
Yeah, I mean, the power of the managed services are, it's powerful. And in a single family home, if you have anything that enables parental controls, that comes through really quickly in understanding how that can be managed. Ted, David's been talking a little bit about what's led us to where we are now, but tell me a little more about some of these future services you see that are beyond some of the things we hear taking place just now, and that, what's the role of that network in enabling the services that most of us may not even be thinking about yet?
So at the beginning, I mentioned a server in a building capturing time event series data. Actually, I just want to add one more piece. The benefit of having a server sitting inside the building is if the internet drops, the building itself functions. So if someone calls from the lobby, it will still reach a suite. If a smoke detector or leak detector goes off, the HVAC system, everything within the building will still work. But the future is actually that time event series data, machine learning, and AI. That is really where it's at. We're just at the beginning of it. Where can we read directly out of the control board of an HVAC unit in a suite, use that data to optimize the central plant? So we're doing the first buildings where we're moving in that direction. The places where the money are made are actually fairly simple. The first one is energy. Energy is 40% of the operating cost of a building. So how do we use machine learning, AI, the fact that we've got a connected system to optimize energy? The second is staff. How do we operate a building with fewer people? Well, now the technology allows a person in the home to be able to control doors, to view cameras. Essentially, you don't need a guard on site anymore because you can use the technology and you can make a savings there. The stuff that I'm super passionate about is when we take time event series data with machine learning and AI, and we start to do things around assisted care. Like, really, the key to this, and I think it's never been said in this so far, but the MDU is actually the metaphor for the smart city. It has all the elements of the smart city, but it's small enough that we can do this stuff right now. So now that we have the patterning in the suite, we can see bathroom light went on at 7 a.m. Well, why didn't it go on the next day at 7 a.m.? Can someone go check to see the person's okay? So the future of this is going to be analyzing these data sets to solve just about any problem that you want to solve. And with the demographic shift, some people say, oh, no, we're not about seniors. We're absolutely all about seniors, because that's what's going to happen. The technology has to be used to improve sustainability, security, and obviously caring for people. We don't have the budgets to care for people. That's the place. And that's actually where I am right now. I'm at a technology conference called AgeWell, which is how do we use this technology to allow people to age independently? How do we use these data sets to be able to do that, to allow people to stay in the home longer?
Well, absolutely. Really, really big points there on the future of healthcare and being able to stay in our homes. And the aging in place term is always kind of interesting because I think we're all doing that no matter what age we are. And we are the people that will be paying for the technology in 20, 30 years that will keep us in our homes and also enable all sorts of different communications and services. So there's the cloud is in the mix here, and cloud services. And so Scott, I want to see if you can maybe touch on this, the big impact of the cloud and where that's taking us. And then I do have a few questions that have come in from the audience, and so I want to get to those next. So Scott, any words of wisdom here you want to share on really this huge value about the cloud and the data exchange that's taking place?
Yeah, I know we're pressed for time here. I'll do my best to keep it short. I think from an Airtide's perspective, and David touched on it a little bit as well in terms of the way that Plume utilizes the cloud and looking at the data inside the home. So from an Airtide's perspective, we would say what's important is to understand that the best environment for an operator, particularly in the multi-gig, low latency future that we have, is to ensure that things that require quick and immediate response are done locally at the edge, right? So making sure that that controller is handling the immediate day-to-day, minute-by-minute activities of the client inside the home as it moves and roams throughout the house and demands bandwidth. The cloud, from our perspective, is really valuable in a couple of ways. Number one, it makes it very easy to bring on third-party partners through standard common APIs that these various third parties can then take data that you have to leverage into their solutions to provide value and insight. Ted's companies and others as well that are delivering value-added services. But for an Airties as an example, it's really important because we can take all of that historical data inside the home and look at those trends and patterns as David spoke about in terms of how clients behave inside the home, where they go, when they go, and what they're doing. In an MDU environment with a high densification of RF, you can imagine that's even more compounded in terms of how you manage and orchestrate 2.45 and now 6 gigahertz inside that building. So it's important to use the cloud for tools like that, where you want to kind of think forward and back and be able to take data to make decisions that you need to then apply locally, but so that the local decision making can be done as effectively and efficiently as possible. So the cloud's very important, but I think what's important is to understand that balance, particularly as you move to that multi-gigabit, low latency environment in the MDU space.
Well, that's great. I do have a question that's pretty relevant to what you're talking about. So let me throw it out here. What happens with power outages or network outages? I think Ted talked a little bit about this when he was explaining some of the things they're doing. But Scott, any comments there on power outage, network outages?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly things inside the home that are going to be of little value to you if you don't have power and you've lost connectivity to the internet, right? I think certainly from a dweller, if you will, in an MDU, or from a business owner, having the proper necessary generator backups and alerting and monitoring of those tools. Good example where cloud comes into play there. Certainly companies like Generac that provide those cloud-based tool sets for alerting and alarming when power does go down and backups have to occur. Informing the consumer, right? MDUs can oftentimes be retirement communities. And I think that's important about MDUs is understand we tend to kind of blanket talk MDU, but it's really about who is in that MDU and what is that MDU for, whether it's a university or a retirement and what the demographic may be. But it may be a retirement community or a snowbird community who has an apartment that they have things in that are running, and they need to be aware that if their power goes out, they want to see that. So having those kinds of alerts that are sitting in the cloud to make notification when things go down to inform you. I think those are all important things to take into consideration as it relates to power and connectivity in MDU.
Well, you bring up a lot of good points. Yeah, go ahead, Ted and David, if you want to comment too.
Yeah, just the one thing is, and this is kind of going back where Vicki was talking about engineering. If you engineer the building right, you don't run into the issue. Power over Ethernet's the biggest boon to this. So the switches in the closets are actually powering the devices. If you take the communication riser of your building and run it through a central UPS back to the generator, your building won't drop. So, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. as long as you design it from the beginning. And that's why I think a lot of this is a philosophy. This isn't just quick fixes. This is about understanding your building. You would have bought UPSs anyways. Instead of buying a bunch of little crappy ones, buy one good one, design the building better, and it won't fail.
And David, I want to come back to you, but real quick, Ted, can you talk about the different role of construction? I know we talked about that a little, just how construction, right? That it's different now when you're thinking about the integrating all this technology. So even the construction process has changed, right?
That's, I think, the fundamental. If you go into commercial buildings lead MDU. And if you go in there, you'll see the lighting is controlled by the network. The building automation systems running on IP, the access control, the security cameras, they've actually converged all the systems onto network-centric technology. We're doing the same thing in MDU now. We're just catching up. So there is a philosophical change in how the buildings are being done. Now, if you go even further, they're talking about DC power and there's all these other things, but fundamentally, the wiring systems of a building have converged so that they're sitting on top of each other. So instead of putting multiple separate wires in a building, you're putting one central infrastructure.
Yeah, really, really good points there. Okay, David, you have any comments on that? And then Vicki, I want to see if you have any anything on enabling new building services in the network. So, David, did you have any comments you wanted to add? Oh, I think you're on mute. There we
sorry
go.
about that. Yeah,
No
no, I think Scott and Ted covered all the points. So in the interest of time, we'll hand it back just so that you can get at least another question that's meaningful for the audience.
Sure. Vicki, did you want to make any comments?
The only thing I would add is kind of a build off of what I think Ted and Scott had mentioned, and the fact that if you think about the next generation of what's going to happen with this, you've got Web.3, you also have artificial intelligence. So when you think about it from a building infrastructure and making smart decisioning based on the intelligence you're gathering from all this stuff, then the digital twins that can run side by side and then inform you how to optimize your building, I think are going to become more and more important over time. And then secondly, that intelligence that we're gathering inside the apartment at the resident experience level, think about it as we're gathering all this data to say, hey, if you did A, B, and C, you'd lower your energy bill by 10, 15% a month. So I think what you're going to see is the artificial intelligence really informing more decisioning at both the building level, but also the end user level. And then I think Web.3 allows that, we've got all this smart infrastructure, like Ted was saying, within the building and the apartment building, but also these smart applications will start interacting with other smart applications, whether that's smart city or other information that's outside the building. And I think that's the next generation around the Web.3.
Yeah, absolutely. That predictive and proactive nature that comes with artificial intelligence and data, and then things almost like dominoes, one thing's happening after the other because they're all interconnected and that AI leading the way. So really, really good points there. I have a couple questions I want to get in. We talk about multi-dwelling units. This could be smart apartments. This could be senior housing. This could be student living. And so one of the questions that we have coming in is how interested are these other, besides the apartments, how interested are the senior care and retirement communities in technology? And then also on the student side, with dorms and student housing. So I'm not sure who might want to comment on these different environments. So let me know.
Elizabeth, I'll jump in because we have different segments around this, right? And so if you look at off-campus student housing, a lot of that information is very important because parents are very concerned about what's happening when their students are away and the safety and just communications around that. Same for senior care. And actually with senior care, if you think about it, there's a continuum, right? It's not just people that are in beds with nurses, right? It's 55 and up living to assisted living to, okay, I truly do need nursing. And it's almost like a hospital environment. And so the ability to remotely monitor with the aging population right now. And as Ted had mentioned, if suddenly the lights aren't coming on, or there's not movement inside the apartment, or they haven't opened the refrigerator in 3 days, does a notification go to the children or whoever they've designated as their contacts? You know, how do you tie back into, you know, remote health, to where you're not having to sit for 2 hours with your 85-year-old mother to get an appointment when she's in pain, but she can wait until her turns up and do it remotely to kind of get that checkup with the right diagnostics. And so I think, you know, apartments represent about 65% of MDUs. And so obviously that's the biggest chunk of the market, but the student housing and the senior living, they also have applications. It may just be a different use of the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And really lots of investments, you know, that have to be made by somebody to enable these things to come in the future. And then, of course, you know, the business model behind it on how you make that work is you know, a big thing everybody is focused on. But certainly we're seeing private equity, lots of investors jumping in. They see the future here, and what a big deal this is. So safety and security certainly driving a lot of this, with senior living, with students, as you noted, Vicki, with, you know, parents even in their kids in college, making sure they're safe. It all comes down to, again, this big word, trust, right? The trusted relationship, the trusted provider. We've got consumers in these environments who are trusting that things are going to work and placing, you know, a whole new level of trust when you're talking about the integration of everything, right, in their daily lives, and that's all working. So I want to see if there's any other comments on senior housing or student housing before we talk about consumer expectations quickly, because I want to make sure we get to that. So are there any other comments on dorm environments, senior, that Scott, David, or Ted you'd like to make?
I think Vicki hit it, right? I'll be quick. I think Vicki hit everything. It's just that spectrum of independent to assisted and using the app to be able to extend circle of care. She's hit all those points. I think those are the key. Sorry.
Yeah,
David.
No problem, Ted. I think for me, it's just a minor comment as well. I think the future is exciting. You know, we look at the next 12, 18 months, there's just so much room for invention all around. MDU, quote unquote, is clearly not a monolith. To Vicki's point, there's the apartments that perhaps might make up 65%, and then these other segments. But in each and every one of these segments, you know, there's some structural changes that are happening. You know, we talked a little bit about the remote healthcare use case, but again, the future is exciting in terms of if you want to build products for these segments. You know, I probably would welcome all. Let's jump into the shoes of the customer, whoever that might be, and just, you know, work backwards to build something for them delightful and inventive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, technology is pervasive. We show 55% of households have a smart home, a connected health device, 38% have a smart home device, 56% have a smart TV. The majority have broadband and Wi-Fi in the home. So it is ever present for us in our daily and work lives. So let's look at this last question. David touched on it, on that, what's coming in 12 to 18 months. Where do you all see the market moving? And if we can keep it brief for just a minute in case people have somewhere to be after this. Ted, we'll start with you, and Scott, David, we'll come back to you again for a final comment, and then Vicki, we will end with you. So Ted, tell us where you think things are headed.
I've been at this for 20 years, literally. What I'd say I'm excited about is I think we've hit the tipping point where now you're seeing mass adoption. We're not, you know, that classic crossing the chasm. We're there. The early adopters are in, the early majorities, and now we're just seeing that everybody knows they need to do something. And I'm passionate about seeing everybody do something because, as it's been said and, you know, looped through all this conversation, this is the access to sustainability, security, future care. As a, you know, North America, we need to do this. So I'm thrilled about the fact that I believe we're at the tipping point.
Awesome. Okay, Scott?
Yeah, I would agree with Ted. I think the key there is we're moving very much away from the early adopter phase of solutions like managed or Wi-Fi and infrastructure to a true services economy, right? And as it relates to broadband, as an MDU owner, as an operator, I think if you're not bringing services to the table to complement your underlying infrastructure, you're going to be facing a race to the bottom on price. You know, still today, we know from surveys the top two reasons that are important for why a customer leaves an operator One is cost, two is reliability, right? They're still very important. And so when you work on those, that's great. In order to move to the next phase, you're going to have to start delivering services. And that underlying infrastructure, whether it's the infrastructure of the building, the infrastructure inside the customer home, or the services on top, the operator and the MDU owner need to look at that as a services delivery platform. And you have to play in that entire space to be successful. So definitely moving towards a services economy in this space is going to be really important in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Great comments. Okay, David, anything you'd like to add?
I'm not going to be contentious. I agree with the previous two speakers. I will end by saying there are very few times, I think, in one's career where you're going to be, I don't want to say never let a crisis go to waste, but, work from home is here to stay. I think there's going to be a lot of invention that we can do together, both as an industry as well as kind of as these collective companies to kind of create new products and experiences. To Scott's point, I think it's going to be all about the experiences that actually allow property managers to create differentiation. And so with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, great. And of course, last but not least, Vicki, we'd love to hear from you. What does the future hold?
Yeah, and I would just build on what the other folks have said you've got to be able to have a price that makes sense, and it has to be reliable, and you need to have services. But I think beyond that, I think we're going to have to be more of a trusted advisor and an extension of a consultant to these folks, because it is so complex to make recommendations around, here's the design, here's how you prepare this for the long term, here's the things you can do, and here's your investment versus return. And part of that is doing the research to understand what drives resident choice, building products that are based on the changing needs of the consumer and the owner over time, and embracing the emerging technology and leveraging that to the benefit of both the MDU owner as well as the end resident and what that brings to them.
Yeah, absolutely. There really is so much to talk about, so much work to do, and clearly I love the passion and dedication of all of you really dedicating your careers to literally building our future world. So Ted, Scott, Vicki, and David, thank you so much for joining us today. I very much appreciate your time. This was a great conversation, so thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, everybody.
Great. So we've been talking about services, integration, partnerships, trust, and really, welcome to the fourth industrial revolution. This is where it's all at, and an exciting time for Parks Associates to be studying these various areas and the consumer and business impacts. So if you hang with us for just a second, we'll be right back with our executive Q&A featuring GVTC, a broadband provider out of the San Antonio area. We'll be right back. Thanks.
And welcome back. And thank you for that great session moderated by Elizabeth Parks. I'm Jason Paris, Vice President of Business Development here at Parks Associates. I'm very excited to welcome a broadband service provider from right here in Texas, which is the home state of Parks Associates, if you weren't aware. Josh is Vice President at GVTC of Product, Business Development, and Strategic Planning. He wears a lot of hats for sure. We're going to be taking questions throughout. So if you have questions, please send them in. We're going to be talking for the next 30 minutes about the path forward from COVID for providers, the idea of service providers as experienced providers, and then looking at short-term and long-term challenges. Thank you, Josh, for being here. Let's start with you providing a brief intro of GVTC and its unique position in the market.
Yes, sir. Yes, Jason. Thanks for having us, and glad to be part of this conference.
Of course.
Yeah, so GVTC, for y'all that don't know GVTC, we are located in the Hill Country outside of San Antonio and between San Antonio and Austin. We're unique in a lot of ways. We're a co-op by design, so we've been in business for over 70 years, so I've been doing this for a long time. We've got a wide variety of products and services we offer. What's interesting, I think, unique about us too, is that we've been in the security business and the cable TV business for over 30 years. So I've had a pretty wide background. This has always been a progressive company looking for opportunities to add value and create value for our customers. Another thing unique about us too is we're a fiber to the home fiber optics provider. We cover about 85% of our footprint with fiber to the home, and that puts us in a great position to be competitive and provide what people need kind of going forward. Another thing unique about us too, I'd say, is our value proposition. We focus on 5 points of value. And I think for us, it keeps us in line with always looking at what we're doing for our members, for our customers. And it ranges from everything from superior customer service to community involvement, with everything from reliability, competitive price, and product choice being a value also. And Jason, that's who we are in a nutshell. In a high growth area and looking for opportunities always.
That's great. And beautiful country down where you guys provide your service too. Quite familiar with it. So how's it going? Huge years since COVID. What's happening now?
Yeah, so COVID was interesting, as everyone experienced. We did see the spike in growth, and for us, we talk about our value proposition. Well, it was probably at its highest demand during that time, and so demand for products and services was high. We saw that throughout. As we've kind of gotten to the post-pandemic, things continue to change, but we've seen a more normalization of our growth. But what's come with that now also is some of the things going on in the economy, the inflation, some of the interest rates and whatnot. So we're seeing some challenges there as well, but still in a growth area, but trying to, like everyone else, kind of see what's going to happen. But we did evolve to a remote hybrid workforce. So I heard some people talk about that earlier, and that is part of who we are now. And so obviously we're focused on our culture as well, maintain the culture we've created over the years.
Can you tell me a little bit about the dynamics between the residential customer and the business customer now versus, say, 3 years ago?
I think for us, we're residential. Well, our business footprint's pretty small in terms of where the areas we are. We're kind of a little more rural area. But I'd say that we're still, still growth. We see more people, probably folks that are working from home. So that's part of the remote workforce that we're seeing out there. Remote learning is still a key part of this as well. All the kids are back in school. There's still a lot of things they learned and are using now from home to do their work and whatnot. So from a business standpoint, again, our small medium business, they're kind of hanging in there. We did have folks that survived most of it in our area. We're in a pretty good growth area, so they survived it, but not a whole lot of real changes from that standpoint.
Let's talk a little bit about value-added services. So churn's obviously the dirty word in the industry, and value-added services has the promise of helping reduce churn and create better experiences for your customers. Can you explain what GVTC is doing in the space?
Absolutely. So we, like everyone else, we had a time of the bundle, right? And we've had a lot of evolution of what's going on. And, the bundle was great because we provided this triple play. And in our case, we also had security. So we had a quad play. And over the years, we've seen, that kind of change, and the value of some of those products and services change. The challenges you've seen in cable TV that we all have seen, and the changes going on there, the changes in the value of the voice product we had. So we've had to evolve, and we've seen, the shift towards, more standalone broadband. We see a lot of percentage of those going up there. And so I think for us, in terms of adding value and reducing churn and remaining valuable to our customers, we just had to continue to evolve our product sets. Everything from our, broadband, pushing further to the house with the Wi-Fi solutions, with more applications in the home, pushing our relationship with the security beyond just monitoring, more interactive security, smart security, cameras that are going on now. So I think we've had a big push to continue to evolve with those things to address that, and we've seen some results from it for sure.
Yeah, kind of a marketing question. So, do you lead with broadband? Do you lead with security? How does that work?
That's interesting. So we probably have led with broadband. I've been in the security business for a long time, but we all know, and I think we talked about, security is a complex sale, as it has been traditionally when you talk about the product and how you got to set it up and whatnot, and and all the value that it adds. Right, there's a certain potential market that's open for security. One of the things I can talk about is we probably, from migrating the future of security, before we would migrate from security monitoring, trying to get into interactive security, to more of the cameras and more of the smart home type stuff. I think what we're finding now is we're making a pivot. And the pivot now is that, broadband is a broader base of people. We've always offered kind of a bundle, but we're getting to a place now where we can simplify some of the product offerings, actually start with more of the cameras, the doorbells and whatnot, and actually start bundling that more as part of our broadband packages, and start moving and migrating customers from a camera type, a simpler, more fits right with their Wi-Fi, with their networking and their cameras, and start migrating them over to more of the security services. So we are pivoting on that a little bit because, again, we had a more limited potential base, and we wanted to see that start shifting over. So something we're definitely focused on.
Let's stick a little bit with your local community. So how does GVTC gain trust within the community? I know you guys have been around for a long time, but with all these new services, we see in our research that trust in service providers with data and security and things of that nature, has fallen off a little bit. And so within your kind of unique footprint, how do you gain trust within your community?
Well, we're very involved in our communities, as you might imagine. Again, and that has to different people. There's a different level of value it has for each person. We are trusted. We've been the trusted provider. Again, we've been here for a long time. However, in a high growth area, a lot of folks don't know us versus the national brand. So we have to build that relationship. And so I think for us, we focus on, we have a campaign we started, comes out of our vision statement, and we talk about creating fiercely loyal customers. And we not only, have that as far as our vision statement, but we've also defined structure and framework around that to be able to implement and operationalize that throughout our company. And I say that because for us, having everyone does Net Promoter Score, NPS scores, that is the result of the campaigns and things and the focus we have on our customer service levels and keeping that as one of our highest value propositions. So, word gets around, the word that comes out from the neighbors, from the people, referrals is probably the strongest thing we can get outside of having a national brand reputation. But our technicians are out in the community. We're heavily involved through our foundation, involved in the community. All of our folks participate. We were at a foundation event this morning, volunteering, doing a bunch of cleanup work at a children's ranch. So we're out and about. And then also, again, our technicians are everywhere and have been trusted over the years. And yes, we feel like we continue to earn trust with our community. Very important.
So looking at growth beyond just taking subscribers from your competitors, our data shows that at the end of 2022, that nationally, 90% of all U.S. households will be internet households. Does that reflect your territory as far as what you see? And those households might be maybe more rural, economically disadvantaged, maybe elderly. Is there room to grow by providing connectivity to those households?
So our area is pretty diverse when it comes to, an urban area versus rural areas. We do have a really rural area, and the dynamics out there are completely different from what they are in some of our more populated suburban areas that we have. So you're absolutely right. We do see probably close percentage you're seeing as far as adoption of broadband. We're watching. Hey, competition is out there fierce in our market and everywhere, right? We are a fiber provider, so we feel like we have a great proposition against our competition. However, we know there's certain wireless solutions that are out there, less expensive type maybe wireless solutions that are out there, and we're seeing some people adopt that. Some people use a mobile phone. I think you guys provided us recently some stats on that too, because we always kind of wondered what that looked like post-pandemic versus during the pandemic, when everyone kind of had to get on it on a fixed wireline solution. But yes, it's a little different. I think in our rural communities, you see more people that probably adopt the wireless solution that's out there. And I know there's satellite and whatnot out there as well. But we do see a difference in terms of even our populated rural markets versus where we come directly outside of San Antonio, where it's a little more urbanized, for sure.
Let's shift gears a little bit and look at how you support the whole connected home. We see time and time again in our data that if something goes wrong with technology in the home, the first person that people think about is the broadband service provider. Even if it's something like I'm not getting connectivity between my new smart lock or something that's nothing to do with the service provider, they think about the service provider. So how is the support needs of consumers changing?
All right. So I think the best way to talk about this is to give you our Wi-Fi story. Wi-Fi, we got in the Wi-Fi business in 2010, and it was a direct result from that. Our technicians, we were out there providing internet service, and what we were finding is that although Wi-Fi was a DIY service back then, everybody just went and bought their own routers and did that. What we found is our customers were looking to us as being the trusted provider in their home to take care of their Wi-Fi. And so the opportunity was, instead of trying to support every kind of device out there that we didn't have any standardization on, we said we need to get into this business. One of the things we did unique, though, is that we actually started not as putting renting equipment and calling it, a more of a product. It was more of a service. So we sold Wi-Fi as a service, as an add-on, and so we did charge for it. And what we found is, and we talk about this even with some of the DIY stuff you see today, that we can go do it ourselves. Well, over a period of time, people just look to their provider to provide that experience for them. And so at one time, I can tell you what you're talking about, the challenge of Wi-Fi and the experience, because everyone measured your internet by how well their connectivity worked and whatnot. And so the calls that were in there. Well, obviously, from technology advancing, also so was the tech and the demand on the end of this stuff that was outrunning, in my opinion, what we could deliver as coverage and capacity within the house and the Wi-Fi. So at one time, this was one of our top issues a few years back. We were so glad to see Wi-Fi 6 come to the market. A lot of advance in there in terms of coverage and mesh networks. And the commitment we made to overcome this was to commit to that. We'd already put, in our opinion, we put fiber optics to the home. We had one of the fastest connections. We upped the speeds to take speed off the table, take the reliability and connection that off the table, and we were ready to take Wi-Fi off the table because that's what our customers expected of us. And so we went with the Wi-Fi 6, and with that came a lot of capabilities. I got to give Calix a plug. We partnered with them, and what also came with that was a lot of remote support capabilities that gave us visibility into the home, and we saw some major improvement. I believe we reduced our truck rolls almost 40-50% over the previous technology we had deployed from a Wi-Fi standpoint. And some of that was from the technology itself, better coverage and not having those issues, but some of it was also having the remote capability of troubleshooting without having to roll a truck. So yes, that was a big issue for us. We feel great about the solution we have now, and it's made all the difference in the world in terms of the service we deliver to customers and reducing the issues that customers have with that connectivity.
So with the Wi-Fi 6 improvements, what are the main support calls you're getting right now from both consumers and businesses?
I'd say that, it's still probably connectivity type issues, but again, I think we're able to communicate effectively with them about, levels in certain part of the house, the type of equipment. We can tell if it's an older piece of equipment that doesn't even comply with some of the standards that will keep that speed up. So I think there's still some of those opportunities in terms of the connectivity, but the amount has reduced drastically. And again, I think a better customer experience is not having to wait on a technician to come out there, and then that technician not having as much visibility as what we have today, even remotely. So having a good view of that's really helped us all. Excuse me.
I'm going to take a question from the audience, which is kind of related. What are the best opportunities for ISPs to leverage their fleet and field staff for new to-the-home services?
Okay. As far as if we're talking about sales, we're all over this. GBTC is this is a sales culture we have. Everybody that interfaces with our customers has some sales opportunities that we feel like our technicians are the most trusted folks in terms of with the company being in their homes. So yes, we do have. I believe that's a big opportunity. One thing we've worked on too. Being in the security business is we've had that for years, but it's always been, just a niche thing. And when you're trying to expand it throughout, get a bigger share of that market, we're seeing it expanding. We're all seeing the stats about people adopting more of this stuff. Well, so goes the requirement for evolving the personas of your workforce. And I think that's been another big focus for us too, is evolving our personas. So our technicians have to now not just know, and we went through this when we really brought in the cable TV and the digital cable TV and some of the other products, Wi-Fi. Our people had become Wi-Fi experts, and so this is no different. When it comes to these other products and services, we're evolving those personas, getting the training, equipping them with something. A real key, I would say, for us, and where we're really excited, especially for this next year and this launch we're about to do, and I talked about us packaging more of a simpler video type, security type solution as a service with our broadband. And the key here is simple. One of the things we found is, security is not the most simple thing to sell unless you really install it and do those types of things. So to broaden the base of the customer, we are offering the simpler solution. It's going to get that foot in the door and start that conversation. And so we're very excited about that. So yeah, that's a great question.
And another question from the audience. So how does the smart technology market compare in Texas to the rest of the U.S.? Do you have any perspective on that? Of course, us Texans like to think we're unique, but maybe not.
Well, what I can speak to is our particular market. And I don't have a stat to compare it to nationwide or whatnot, but I can tell you that from our personas that we've done evaluation of the folks in our market, 75% of the personas we have are the perfect match for the technology adopting, and of all ages, whether they have kids at home or not. Just across, there's probably 4 or 5 different ones, but 75% of those personas are in the market or are good customers for this product that we offer. So we're blessed in an area that's, again, north between San Antonio and Austin, and again, it's a pretty progressive area and tech savvy. We have a rural area too that we're probably not seeing as much, but there's not as much growth there as well. So where our population is, we've got a good market for it, but I can't speak for the whole state of Texas.
I'm going to take a couple more questions from the audience, and then I want to kind of look out to the future a little bit. So the labor issues around the whole country, is this an issue for you in supporting your whether they be field techs or support staff? How big of an issue is this for you?
Like everyone else, when we come out of the pandemic, a lot of our world has changed. We've already been doing things differently. One of the things we committed to strategically as a priority was that we must retain and acquire the best talent. We talked about our commitment to superior customer service, all these great things we're trying to do. We have to have the best employees and talent. And so I think we took a really proactive response to that. We took some initiative to, adopt this remote hybrid workforce that we felt like in an area where we're kind of, and again, we're outside of San Antonio. We're not in the urban area. So there's still a drive and whatnot to get back to our area. And so we have to remain attractive to continue to compete for those jobs, especially when the world now is a competition, whenever people are hiring from all over the U.S. for a job that you can do from home. And so that was a big step we did, I think, to help mitigate that issue. And it worked well for us. The other thing we did look at too is, wages, everything going on there too as well. We had to make some calls, especially at entry level. When your entry level positions are competing with, retailers and whatnot out there, and these are great employees, but they've they've got to look at the bottom line, and especially now as inflation and everything else is going up. So we proactively took a response to that as well. So I can say we've mitigated the issues we have in terms of workforce, in terms of hiring technicians and whatnot. However, when it comes to everything else, the cost of labor, contracting, construction, everything else, we are seeing those impacts. And for sure, supply chain has delayed a lot of projects for us as well, hoping to come through that hopefully in this 2023 year.
And another one, getting back to the value-added services, we've seen service providers add these services, literally just as a value add to help with the consumer experience and help retain customers. Have you been able to add recurring monthly revenue for offering these services?
Yes, we have. So, we talk about this all the time. And again, we saw the shift. We had all the bundles, we had all the add-ons, things that went there, and then that kind of went away. When you start looking at your trends, and we do a 15-year planning model, we look out trajectories of 15 years, and we look and we're seeing kind of what's going on. We do understand. Everyone says it before. We do not want to be a dumb pipe. If you're offering just a standalone just pipe to a house with no other services and features and everything else, applications that go with it, you're looking at a commoditized service. So when we look at our ARPUs and what builds it up, I mean, it's got a base layer of broadband that's, the connection to the house, but most of our components come from those things like the Wi-Fi service that we offer, whether we offer some parental controls type things out there, premium tech support type things that are out there. We offer several types of things, and we're trying to build on that as well. There's always a challenge. I think for us being a smaller provider is that when we have 4 products to sell, the time it takes to sell those products, when a phone call comes in, it can be quite cumbersome. So we start having all these add-ons. It gets real crazy because our product suite is just massive. So I think for us, it's more about trying to continue to package, bundle the online channels for us. I mean, again, we're a smaller company. We've had an online presence. We've done great with that, but we have a lot of work to continue to do, especially when we're throwing in this more smart home, smart security, where there's so many options of things. There's cameras and there's sensors and there's all this great stuff, but getting that out to the customer is probably one of the biggest challenges. So yes, we do see, again, a lot of our ARPU comes from what we consider value-added services, but we kind of continue to shift and move. And for us, we can, from the product team, we're like, hey, we keep adding on. There's lots of opportunities to add products, but if you can't move them and see the result, then you're just doing activities, and we're not about activity, we're about results. So for us, it's the challenge of getting the right channels. Again, with our technicians, with our support folks, they're key channels in these add-on services, value-added services. They see the opportunities. We've even with our if we have outsourced people that talk to our customers, whether it's some tech support or whatnot, we've engaged them in our sales and referrals programs as well. So yeah, you just got to keep moving with it, but finding a way to move them is probably the biggest challenge because it's complex.
So how do you differentiate versus the large national brands that maybe have more brand awareness?
I think our biggest differentiator is customer. I mean, we have our value proposition, but superior customer service. And I'm glad we're talking about this. When everyone, you look at the service industry today, you look at any industry, you get on a phone call, you call somebody, you're on hold or getting a call back. It takes at least almost 30 minutes for everyone. And for us, we may not compete on a national level when it comes to the size, the volume, but we're not the cheapest price provider. We're competitive price, but not the cheapest provider. But one thing we can excel in is superior customer service. And that's one thing we do. You call us, you're going to get someone to answer your phone. We're committed to stats that are really aggressive when it comes to answering the phone within 30 seconds or so. Repair times, same thing. You're going to have someone there quickly. When it comes to installation time, same thing. So the customer service experience you have is going to be completely different. So when someone's looking at leaving for $10 or whatnot, and by the way, we all know if you're providing 4 services out there in broadband and all this complicated stuff, they're calling you, they're going through your channels to get support. They're having to contact you for support. We know that. And so if you're not available, you're not competitive. If everyone's the same, then that's what they expect. But when they have us and we're something really different, that does differentiate us big time.
That's great. Well, I'd like to wrap up kind of looking at the future. So you guys have been super busy adding services and doing great. What's next? looking over the next 5, 10 years, what are the sorts of things we might see from GBTC?
Well, what we talk a lot about is beyond broadband, advancing broadband and beyond is kind of what we talk about. So you're going to continue to see us focused on deploying more than just the broadband, building on the strengths that we have mentioned about these things that we're evolving the product sets. We're most excited about this next year. I think our commitment, our ability to get a smart security product that's simplified, that's to get it in the door and have something to grow with our customers, we're very excited about. That's probably the biggest thing we're excited about right now. In the future, I'll tell you, the other thing we talked about, everything within our product umbrella is, connected, smart, and secure. So we're continuing to look for those things to make a more secure value option for the customer. Again, the speeds, continue multi-gig, those kind of things out there, keeping that up, reliability, keeping that stuff off the table that, hey, differentiating ourselves from the competition, and we have that. And then keeping up with that customer service. But a lot of great things in there. But we have a lot of work to do with a lot of areas. Evolving these personas, that doesn't happen overnight. And we've gone through this before with some of the technologies, and we'll continue to do that.
Josh, thanks for being here, and thanks for the insights from Central Texas. And we hope to have you on another panel soon.
Great. I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Jason. And thank you, Parks Associates. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, and take care. If you could just hold with us for a couple moments, my colleague, VP of Research, Jennifer Kent, is going to be leading a panel discussion about smart home strategies.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason and Josh. What a great conversation, really leaving a framework here for our discussion, which is all about bringing industry experts together to talk about the smart home strategies, focusing specifically on services, business models, opportunities, operational considerations about building those service revenues around connected home products and consumer IoT solutions. So as Jason mentioned, I'm Jennifer Kent, Vice President of Research with Parks Associates, and I'm so pleased to be moderating this next panel. Now, when I say services, here are a few of the areas I mean. There's many, but 90% of consumers age 65 and older consider it very important to live independently in their own homes as they age. We see companies not only offering products to help them do that, but really focusing on offering monitoring, lifestyle, and care services that support seniors and their family caregivers. We also see interest and demand for professional installation and support services. The majority of smart home buyers who are interested in warranty protection tell us that they also want ongoing technical support services to come with that warranty. And of course, as more of our commerce shifts online, we see rising interest in in-home package delivery, like the Walmart Plus in-home service and the Amazon Key services. Amazon and Walmart partnering with a variety of different access control players and still really working out that model and what that's really going to look like long term. But in our July 2022 survey, we did find that over a quarter of U.S. internet households said that they are very interested in in-home delivery service, and 17% said that they are very interested. So certainly kind of an emerging service with some opportunity there and making the partnerships and the business model work. Okay, so looking at security services in particular, there's a big opportunity to expand beyond the self and the professional security monitoring when it comes to generating service fees. Video storage for those with smart cameras and video doorbells is a big area of service growth for security companies right now. But security system owners also show incredibly strong interest in additional add-ons like vehicle monitoring, as well as personal security monitoring. So PERS, that personal emergency response service, is traditionally thought of as an elderly use case, right? A medical alert or panic button. But there's an opportunity to provide personal safety services to all age groups, and particularly runners and hikers or those working night shifts or in isolated circumstances. Now, as we look into the future, we see that services will be key in setting apart smart home experiences. So we see connectivity and basic interoperability increasingly becoming table stakes. And the next generation of value creation in the smart home will be all about services, bundling, effective partnerships, adjacent categories in the smart home, and standout features, and really truly moving into the promise of the smart part of the smart home, which is the intelligence. So services are going to be playing a continuing and big role, big opportunity. So today during our panel, I'm excited to hear from our speakers about how they have identified service opportunities in the smart home or consumer IoT markets, the key to getting business models right or adapting them for different client types, and the operational view and best practices for customer onboarding, support, and ultimately retaining service customers. And just before I introduce our panelists and welcome them in, I'd love to just remind you that we do have a polling question that I'm going to pull in here during our chat, and also the chat and Q&A tabs. I've seen that many of you have already had some great questions coming in, so we love that. And we'd love to see some questions for this panel as well, and I'm happy to pull some of those into our conversation. So with that, Greg, you're up first. I would love to introduce Greg, who's the Director of Revenue Edge Solution Partnerships with Calix Partner Community. Thank you for being with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about Calix.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate it, and really appreciate Parks having me on. Always love participating in any event you guys have, so thank you. Craig Baldoff, Director of Revenue Edge Partnerships with Calix. Calix is a name that is not a lot of people know, but that's intentional, right? Today, Calix has just over 1,800 fiber-based service providers around North America and the globe, predominantly serving rural markets. We often say that Calix is found in most of the non-NFL cities that are out there today. Our customers are small, serving anywhere from just a few thousand subscribers upwards of 50 to 100,000 customers. GBTC was a perfect example of a customer that serves rural America, that our last speaker. And the great thing about Calix and the fact that we've been able to deliver or build so many customers around rural America is the fact that we're delivering each of them a platform. And that's what this slide shows. We've spent a little over $1 billion over the last 7 or 8 years building out this platform to deliver a robust fiber delivery platform, right? All based on, and it's not just about hardware. Our solution is all about software. How can we have the core software tools that allow a service provider to easily manage and operate their network, easily identify customers and new potential prospects, understand their behavior and market to them in a way that makes sense for them. And then more importantly, as GVTC just said, give them the tools that allow them to deliver a superior customer service, to their end users, right? And and then on top of that, once you build that platform out, give them the ability to launch value-add services that are important not only to their members and their customers, but also to the community, right? And that's a huge focus of everything that we do. So, and I'll say one other thing, that we are just coming out of our own connection. So I apologize if my voice is a little off. We just spent the last 4 days hosting a little over 600 to 700 of our service providers out in Las Vegas, and not only talking about the first 7 services that we've delivered in the market, but announcing the next 8th, 9th, and 10th services, or 11th services that are coming to market here shortly. So.
Fantastic. Well, hoping to hear a little bit about that today. Perhaps we're actually going to be talking a lot about the B2B to C services.
Absolutely.
You just spoke to 800 or 900 of your own service providers that you're supporting. So it's fantastic. Welcome back, and you sound just fine.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So next, I'd love to introduce Alan Coleman, who's the founder and CEO of Sweeper. Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Sweeper. And you're on mute, so you're going to have to unmute yourself there.
My apologies. Thanks for the invite. I'm delighted to be here to speak. So Sweeper is a digital experience platform focused on the provision of care to customers. It's a B2B2C platform. We sell to global ISPs and global connected product manufacturers, and we allow them to deploy a multiple amount of different support challenges that their customers face every day. So those support issues can range from technical support, outages, network issues, device issues, to billing issues or account issues. Sweeper allows those organizations to construct centrally all their business logic, all their rules, all the thresholds, and to deliver highly personalized care to their customers, and then analyze those care journeys and work on a principle of continuous improvement and continuous effectiveness. Some examples of how that would work is like a customer, we in a digital channel will be able to help a customer differently with the same problem. So for example, we will take into consideration a customer's technical aptitude, their sentiment, we'll take into consideration the diagnostics from their home, we'll take into consideration their relationship with the provider and their relationship with this issue. And based on all of those different considerations, we will then choose the optimum path or the optimum content, so that, for example, a more technical person can get a pithier, quicker resolution to their issue, or someone who's technically ambivalent or lacks confidence with technology can be given a much more gentler, more explicit pathway to help them with their issue. Fundamentally, 80% of all calls to care are resolved on the first issue. And one of 3 things happens to affect that. There's either a commercial intervention, a technical intervention, or an educational intervention, and they are all digitizable. So Sweeper was built on the premise that 80% of all interactions around care should start and be triaged in the digital channels first, and then those digital channels should be able to deliver up to 80% containment, such that we fundamentally change the shape of what care looks like. It's better for the consumer, who gets high quality, high personalized care 24/7 without any of the headache of waiting. And it's better for the operator, who gets massive operational cost savings. So that's Sweeper.
Wonderful. Thank you for giving that background, and also some of the benchmark metrics that you're dropping here. Always really interesting to hear that. So we'll get into that a little bit more as well. Thanks, Alan.
No problem.
Okay, next we have Rebecca Gutierrez, who's the VP of Marketing and Public Relations with Blink Charging. Hi, Rebecca.
Hey, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. always happy to share what I know about an industry that is literally exploding. So Blink Charging is a leading owner, operator, and manufacturer of electric vehicle charging stations, both for smart homes, but also on the commercial side as well. We're definitely in a high growth time in our company. We're based here in Miami, Florida. But all the rage and all the conversation right now is how are we going to meet the very aggressive benchmarks that our governments are collectively deciding for the adoption of electric vehicles. It's a known fact, you see statistic after statistic, that 80% of drivers actually want to charge at home. So what we really do is we work to enable that and enable single family homeowners to make smart decisions in their energy use with their charging as well. It's good for the consumer, it's good for utility, it's a win-win for everyone. We recently deployed a new mobile app that will then pair with our new, about to be released in the next few weeks, home charger as well.
Fantastic. Absolutely exploding market, like you said. A lot of growth and learning about how to serve customers well in this environment. And so very excited to get into that in just a little bit. So next up, we have Ronan Lepupon, who's the VP of OnTech and Smart Home Services with OnTech Smart Home Services. So Smart Services, excuse me. Hi, Ronan. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, Jennifer, and thank you for the invitation. It's good to be here with all of you. So as you mentioned, my name is Ronan Lepupon. I'm the VP for OnTech today. We are a Dish company. I'm also responsible for the Dish Smart Home Services as part of our business. So think about as us as a system integrator for the home, right? So we sell product, we sell services, we install, we integrate within your existing app or your existing environment. We also support that environment day two. And then we do that with some very key partners, like you can see on this one pager. Think about from a capability perspective, we support pretty much every zip code across the U.S. today. That represent over 6,000 technicians today in the field, really bringing smart home services to life in the customer environment. And we represent roughly and touch approximately 4 million homes on the given year. So that's kind of give you a little bit of a scope and scale of our capabilities. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we're aligned with some very key partners in the smart home connected world, such as Google and ADT and Ring and Amazon and plenty of others partners that we bring on board every few months or so. So that's the scope of work, and looking forward to engage with the team.
Great. Thank you, Ronan. And we have Miriam Rogers, who's the Director of Multifamily Sales at Brivo. Hi, Miriam. Tell us a little bit more about Brivo.
Hey, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having all of us today. Miriam Rogers, Director of Multifamily Sales at Brivo. And Brivo's been in business for more than 20 years. We are a global leader in access control. And we're in 42, I think it actually might be 47 different countries now. So when you start looking at like access control and the way that you do security, it really is about the partnerships that you build and how you can provide a cohesive ecosystem, especially in the multifamily world. But we have over 70,000 different deployments. And of those, within probably the last 2 years, we've natively grown multifamily into about 3,500 communities. And been in business, like I said, 20 years, but have 10 years of security audits. And I think that's really important to illustrate when you start looking at providers in this space, and especially with everything on the cloud, making sure that you're partnering with people that are secure, take your information and protect it in a way that you would want your own personal information protected. And we work through a lot of different solutions, and we really are the only access control platform that can provide an entire ecosystem for multifamily, not just access control, but video surveillance, smart apartment technology, integration with parking solutions. So if you think of like an entire city block and all the moving parts and pieces that go into securing a building or making it a smart building, we have a solution that is either our own or integrates with third-party API partners to provide a really robust solution for not only multifamily, which is my vertical, but any type of building that is has a foundation.
Yeah, when we think of the services that you're providing and the multifamily space, there are many different stakeholders here, and the complexity of those services is really interesting to think about. So pleased you're here with us.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's jump into the conversation. I am going to actually bring in the audience polling question kind of at the top of our discussion. So if you haven't had a chance to vote in our poll, just asking about the biggest service opportunities in the connected home, please do so, and we'll pull those up in a minute. One thing that is really interesting to get into with our panelists today, because there's a mix of offerings here, is looking at direct-to-consumer services built on sort of smart home or connectivity, and then also the B2B and B2B2C type services. And I'm going to start with, on the consumer side, Greg, I'm going to come to you first. We just heard Jason and Jeff talk a lot about internet service providers and kind of the decline of the traditional triple and quad play, and the ISPs looking for different ways to provide value into the home. And you just had your big conference with 900 sounds like service providers and customers of your own. So tell us a little bit about the opportunity to provide new services to the consumers, starting right at that connectivity level.
No, absolutely, and thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because they're absolutely right. The triple play is no longer available, right? Voice, video, and data had always been the traditional go-to-market strategy, and now it's voice is gone. Most service providers are actively getting out of video because of streaming, and so it's down to broadband, right? And so you have to, first of all, it's table stakes to have a robust connection to the home, symmetrical connection. So you can do connections like this a year. So all of our service providers are delivering, 250, 500, 1 gig services, and then some. We're already testing 10 gig services in market. But the problem, because it cannot just be about speeds and feeds. It has to be about the value add services over the top. And so that's one of the things we actively try to do for all of our service providers from a partnership perspective, is bring in new partners, ones that we've announced that are in market with, guys like customers or partners like Arlo, Servify, Bark. From a social media monitoring perspective, it allows service providers to provide robust services over the top on top of a great solution. So when another service provider enters that market in terms of competition, it's not just a battle for, hey, this service provider is $5 cheaper or $10 cheaper. My service provider is providing me a robust set of solutions, not just about speed. It's value, it's customer service, it's all of those things that that have already been mentioned to deliver that great experience.
So, one thing I want to pick up on that too, and I'm actually gonna Ronan next, and then Rebecca. So is by offering all of these additional add-on services, you're also not only adding, to the potential value stack, right, but also giving consumers more choice of what they take from you. And one thing that I think that we're seeing a lot in the security smart home space too is giving consumers more choice of how they buy, how they install, and how they monitor things, which I think speaks a lot to the opportunity we see around install to the home. I mean, Ronan, on the OnTech Smart Services side, right, you're working with players that we traditionally think of as DIY. Well, they're not just DIY anymore if you can have professional install, and also they're offering pro monitoring. So there's a lot of choice happening.
That's correct. I mean, we're seeing a really different type of demand from the ADT fully monitored type of security solution all the way up to the Google or Ring or Simply Safe type of solution that you can self-monitor on your own. So we're seeing different kind of demand, and we want to be as flexible as we can for our customer base to really support whatever their current needs are. We usually start when we're in the home at the Wi-Fi layer, and for us we assess the connectivity layer, and we have key partners that allow us to really provide mesh network that can support that environment in the home, and then we start building the vertical strategy for smart home security or smart home utility and entertainment on top of that. So to the point that the ISP and the broadband provider is key, but we usually start at the at the connectivity layer from a Wi-Fi. And, to your point you made earlier, I mean, the demand for smart home services and smart home security is on the rise. It's increasing. So it's pretty significant for us.
Ronan, can you share it all about what you're seeing? The customers who are asking for a professional to come to their home, right?
Yeah.
We do find that our data shows that the number one technical support issue that people have with their smart home devices is just that they're falling off the network, but also, of course, the initial installation too.
Yeah.
Are there specific issues that people are having that you're commonly called upon to address?
Well, I think you called it earlier, right? You see them advertised as a DIY offering, but a lot of customers prefer the DIFM, do it for me, right? Not many customers are really comfortable with a screwdriver going into the wire of their doorbell and try to figure out, is that something that I can do on my own? Do I have the capabilities? Do I have the knowledge? Do I even want to do it, right? So we're seeing that 55% of the marketplace is actually favoring do it for me, in having a white glove service, professional, technician coming to your home, not just doing only the installation, but doing the integration to your current app system. Are you on a Google Nest environment? Are you on an Alexa environment? Whatever case might be, we'll do the integration, we'll do the teaching, and then we'll do the day 2 support as well.
Yep. Now, Rebecca, I wanted to kind of come to you third here because I've been watching the audience poll, and we asked, what is the biggest service opportunity in the connected home? And you hear the options that we gave people. There's so many options out there, but we gave people the option to select senior care, aging in place, energy-related services, whether that be, solar storage, EV charging, energy monitoring management, installation services and tech support, connectivity and network-based services, security-related services, monitoring video storage, as well as serving MDU owners and operators. And there's a pretty good spread, but the number one place people are seeing opportunity right now is in energy-related services. So I'd love to, turn to you and have you tell us a little bit more about where you think, there's a real opportunity, especially in the charging space. You gave us a little bit when you were doing your introduction about not just, let's say, selling what's the model for charging? Is it the installation and the hardware, or an ongoing, right, service relationship that's monetized over time?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually very happy to hear that utility and energy is leading the pack, even if slightly. It's actually very much in keeping with kind of what you're hearing in the news, right? Everyone's starting to pay more attention about utility bills, whether it's because they're expensive, whether it's because they're paying attention to what's happening in Ukraine, which definitely is catching eyebrows. How sensitive are we? And also, I'm here in South Florida, solar panels are gaining steam, and there's a lot of talk about just kind of self-sufficiency and reliance on that. And EVs play a huge role in that, right? Because your vehicle is a giant battery pack, which in an emergency could easily get all your basic functions, your refrigerator in your home, and operating. Where charging comes into play is really helping make smart energy choices. So you're not charging your car during peak hours. We all know when those are. You want to do it overnight. You want a slow and steady charging for your vehicle so that you're not pulling any demand charges or any additional pull to the grid. People are really becoming a lot more informed. For Blink, it's quite interesting, though, because we have the smart home solution, we have the multifamily solution for those who are in multifamily residences. But the other half of our product is actually, while you're out and about, it's the commercial public charging sector. What we're finding on the charging side and how it fits in is we're becoming an energy company in helping to educate and inform and really being the dispenser of the electricity. So really an interesting shift from traditional way of thought, which is right where we want it to be, which is great for the industry and great for consumers as well.
Awesome. Well, let's shift our attention now to the B2B or B2B services side, right? Let's start with Alan here, and then I'll go to Miriam. So
when you were thinking about, developing your services in the digital customer care space, Alan, how did you identify that the industry entities here that you're serving, really had a need, and especially in the connected home space, for the services that you're offering?
Well, like many entrepreneurs, I didn't determine the industry had a need. I determined that I had a need. So, and then I worked from there. So my observation was that as our homes become more connected, and more interconnected, we have hardware platforms, software platforms, networks, all interoperating, and the only person who has an overriding concern around everything working, and working correctly was the homeowner, and that felt like a disproportionate burden on the homeowner. So we had a vision that said care should be provided at the moment of need. So as soon as a homeowner can express their dismay at something not working, a voice assistant or something else should be able to commence the problem solving at that moment, that they shouldn't have the latency of waiting to speak to an agent in a call center, and that the care should not be one size fits all, that the care should be reflective of who this person was, what their situation is, and whether they had brought this issue to their provider more than once before. And that the provider should be able to adjudicate how to best help customers with the diversity of different situations they find themselves in. Because frankly, the scalability of a contact center centric customer support model is questionable, and it certainly is harming some of the economics of the connected home. And so we took a view that it was possible to build care experiences that treated everybody as an individual, that were universally available across all digital channels, and that were highly personalized. And so that was sort of the underpinnings of where we saw the opportunity. And if we get that right, then it makes very fertile ground for customers to buy way more services without the anxiety of saying whether my home is becoming unmanageable and unwieldy.
Do you think that it also rides some existing consumer behavior? So in our research, we do find when we ask people who have had a support technical issue, right? Well, what did you do first? They all try to self-service, right? Your first step is to call the call center, right? It's to Google or to tinker, and then Google, and then YouTube, and then, but if your solutions, already have a DIY type tool or bot or something that that's sort of an initial step in that maybe rides existing how consumers really want to interact before getting to the call center.
Yeah, like it's a bunch of problems, right? So there's a lot of silent sufferers. So like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, I think, according to an Ofcom report I saw recently, suggests that they don't only 1 in 4 or 5 will actually go to the trouble of letting the provider know they've got a problem. And those customers that don't, they become churn risk because they're not getting value from the connected product. That's also why you'll also see in the industry a huge discrepancy between people who purchase a connected product and people who subscribe to the underpinning service of that connected product. So I have seen household names who are doing 1 in 4, like 1 in 4 of their customers will actually actively participate in the connected device and subscribe and use it actively. 75%, it gathers dust, right? And that's enormous. It's a massive loss of value, and it's a loss of value because customers aren't confident, aren't getting the care, and they churn. They just stop. I'm not going to use this thing. It's not giving me value. And frankly, unless we find a better way to onboard customers and retain their attention and give them confidence in the device and confidence that it will work, and that we will continue to kind of edge forward, but not nearly with the big leaps that we ought to.
Yep. Well, so Miriam, I'd love to take this into the multifamily universe, right? You're serving multiple stakeholders, the property owner operator, the resident, even I know maybe partnering with dealers. Tell us how you think about serving all of these unique clients, and we do often have security dealers kind of in our audience and thinking about, what services they might be able to be providing within the multifamily space.
Well, I do just want to say I can relate to both what Ronan and Alan were saying as a consumer when it comes to technology. I work in the technology space, and I will often call somebody else to handle something for me because I don't want to deal with it, right? Or I buy something and I'm like, I'm sending it back. It looks too complicated. I don't want to take time to dive into this. So I think that's important to recognize because we're all consumers in the services that we're offering. And then when you start looking at how we go to market, how we fulfill those needs in smart home, security, access control, multifamily has a ton of different stakeholders. You're often selling to developers, to property managers, to asset managers, and to residents. And at the end of the day, the service provided is where you win or lose a deal. So we work with dealer channel partners, and we could not be successful without our partners because multifamily isn't in just one zip code. It's often spread across multiple zip codes, multiple states. The asset types are diverse, and we have to be able to have fulfillment. And it's not, you can't just go into somebody's home and find somebody off the street. You want to make sure that whoever's working with your customers are credible, that they have a background check, they have the security or certification clearances needed for those different zip codes. So it's really important to start looking at how you scale that and make sure everybody's qualified. You don't want just a stranger coming into your home. And I'm sure that Ronan goes through that same background or vetting process because you're dealing with the home and security of a person. And often in multifamily, it's reselling the same service to multiple people. You have to have support not only through your channel partners, but us as a hardware provider. What can we do internally to support the residents? It's a lot of, I don't want to say a burden, but there's a lot of turnover in property management. And so often the training cycle needs to be repeated, sometimes as frequently as a month or two, but you can't have a product that isn't able to be self-sufficient. Technology isn't about, or smart buildings isn't about the technology that goes into the buildings. It's about what it can do and solve time for the end user. So making sure that training and onboarding processes are supported, that residents feel like they have somebody that they can call 24 hours a day for support to lift that burden and take it off of the property managers. And that's truly where not only our client success team comes into play, but our partners, they're the front line and they're the ones who are going to be able to take that service to the next level, because you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have superior service, you're going to lose that customer. They're not going to be happy. Hardly anybody writes a good review. They write the reviews that are bad. So, you know what I mean? So making sure that that service level is superior, and then understanding what the different challenges are for each stakeholder within the organization. Because if I'm a property manager, I do not want 200 residents calling me because their smart devices aren't working. Like, that is the last thing I want. That technology better be working on behalf of and for me. And then also, the value component of, sure, you can make money off of technology, but what does it solve operationally? And that's often what I try to focus on, is technology should be saving you money and saving you time, and also have the cool feature that's attracting and retaining the current residents.
Do you feel like people, the property owners or the residents will most often come to you for support directly, or to the dealers, or both?
Directly, I mean, it's kind of both. We encourage our customers to go through the dealer because they have resources, usually boots on the ground, but then we also have internal resources that are available to be able to call into customer support. But our dealers do a really great job in terms of interfacing with the on-site staff and the residents. It's just having layers of support is really important.
Yeah. In the multifamily space, just sort of to stick on the dealers a little bit here, we just kind of interested in your take on this. So, we see the multifamily space as a really important growing area for dealers who may have traditionally focused on single family residential and now are kind of competing with the DIY solutions and looking for somewhere where maybe their services hold more value. It seems like multifamily is a really great fit for moving into, a place where certainly, owner operator is going to continue to need those professional services. Just kind of interested in the growth that you're seeing in the multifamily space for dealers.
Oh, huge growth. There's a little bit of challenge to overcome if you are working with a traditional integrator who's done commercial access and then going into the residential space, because it's a different product set. It really is an ecosystem of services. And like I said, there's a lot of turnover. But being able to change your mindset to focus on the growth of the vertical and the project as a whole has sometimes been a challenge internally with, people who've been doing commercial access for 30 years. They don't want to look at the hardware margins that are like unattractive in residential. We'll just call it as it is. But they're used to like the big margins on access control and commercial grade. But if you can start changing the way you think about a project as an ecosystem and holistically, and the opportunity to get, not only the services on access control and video surveillance, but smart apartments, you really become a better provider because you eliminate the need to call multiple vendors. I think all of us have that same frustration where you don't want to have to call 15 people to get an answer for one service. So the more that we can unify our solutions, work with trusted partners in this space to create a holistic experience, is going to be able to just prolong the growth of this market. And it couldn't be a better time now to get into multifamily. We start looking at the economy, it's slowing down. There's concerns about recession. Multifamily and rent is the most recession-proof industry that there is. So anybody who has questions about should I be going into this space, the answer is yes, 100% you should.
Yeah. Okay. Resounding answer there. So Rebecca, I'd love to come back to you for a minute. When we think about serving multiple stakeholders, right? So you've got a charging solution, obviously, to the EV owner, but then also the ability to perhaps provide insights and services to the utility side too. So can you share a little bit about, what opportunities you see there to serve the business side, and kind of have two different pieces of value that you're providing to different stakeholders?
Yeah, for sure. So the utilities have a vested interest in all the data that all of these appliances, our smart chargers, are collecting on the single family side, but also on the multifamily side. Little known fact, EV charging, when we got started back in 2009, or 2009, I know what year it is, really was kind of a government research project. They funded a lot of charging stations, both in the home and on the commercial side, to understand how much electricity at that time the EVs would draw when people would plug them in. Well, nothing's changed since then, but now the question remains, who owns that data? So you see a lot of new entries into the residential smart charging for EVs. You see a lot of utilities getting involved in it. One, because it's a natural extension of their business. They own the kilowatts. They want to own the charging in your home, but they also very much want to own the data. Here in Florida, Florida Power and Light, our utility, is offering a very aggressive program just for that reason. They want to own the data. We work with the utilities to provide some of that data, but there's a consumer question there, is how much do you want to produce or provide to them? So for our programs are all opt-in, whereas some of these other ones, maybe you don't know you're opting in. But it's really interesting then pairing, talking about the whole experience. Although slightly different iteration, it's the same thing. When somebody wants to charge their vehicle at home, they want it just to work. But then they also want to leave and charge outside their home, and they want it to work there too. So the big challenge for us is ensuring that seamless in and out of home experience. And that's regardless of single family or multifamily home. It needs to absolutely be user-centric, fully transparent on what data is being shared and how it's being shared. And, just making sure that consumers the technology statement was so perfect. The technology is supposed to make your life better, not make it more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of harks back to what Elizabeth said in the very first panel about how important it is to establish that trust with the relationship and earn it and keep it. And we really see that as a differentiator in the future too. I set up saying services and partnerships, but absolutely that earned trusted relationship. So I'd love to turn to Ronan and then Greg and talk a little bit more about, the role and responsibility you're taking on when in this kind of B2B2C relationship, right? And what your customers are looking for you to be providing through to the end user experience. Now, Ronan, obviously you guys are you're actually in the home, so you are interfacing directly with customers, but what other ways is your client calling on you, either for insight into their customers, knowing their customers better, how?
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, when you look at the logos that I presented earlier and the type of partners that we deal with, they're looking for us to really support some of those customers' need on the back end. And so to avoid, maybe higher return rate on a DIY product. So how do we bring that product to life, integrate to the customer environment? And so we spend a lot of time with those partners to really model this out and make sure that we provide a really successful customer engagement and have a customer, a flow process that is top notch. And so that's part of it. I'd like to go back to, what Marianne mentioned earlier. I can enjoy really our passion for MDU. The other side of the B2C or B2D and B2C type of value prop is the SMB space today, which I think, as dealers should spend a lot of time in. There's a lot of growth in the SMB space. There's a lot of demand for security, for example, solution in the SMB space. There's a need to provide a solution that is a little bit more cost effective than maybe what was available, previously. So, how do we help those small business community to really grow and take advantage of some of those solutions that are available to the consumer market? So I know Ring, for example, is spending a lot of time, and Google in that space, but there is some opportunities for, some of the dealers out there.
Yeah, we definitely see, we survey SMBs every 2 to 3 years. In fact, we're doing our next one in January. So working on the questionnaire now. If anybody's interested, let us know, because we're always interested in what you guys want us to ask. Helps us with our questionnaire development. But we definitely see that SMBs tend to buy a little bit more like consumers than enterprise and commercial, right? And so they kind of fit in this nice little area that they're sort of premium consumer buyers and fit that in there. Now Ronan, we have a question from the audience that I would love to kick to you. So one of the questions is, does anyone envision one service provider in the home and only one? And if so, who would that be? And Ronan, I love to go to you here, because it's like, how much can your agents do, right? How much can they take on?
Yeah, I mean, we can take quite a bit, right? So we focus, as I said earlier, on the connectivity layer. We focus on home security, utility. So we spoke about energy consumption. How do I manage that in my home? So we do also install thermostat and set this up for you. We also focus on entertainment. How do we connect to your TV and sound system and accessories and all that? But there is so much out there, right? So smart home connected world is very vast, is very large. There is a lot of devices that are maybe specific that we maybe never had a chance to really integrate to the home yet. That will be a challenge for us. But in most cases, we could probably support 80+% of the devices that are available in the marketplace today. And I think when you look, and we haven't talked about Matter yet, but when you look about the future of Matter and some of the capabilities to really integrate various OEM, various devices to one hub, and ability to control that from one hub versus maybe having a dozen of different apps on your phone, that I think will accelerate the demand for additional smart home capabilities. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually the question of Matter, which how can we have a connection session without talking about Matter? One interesting thing that it does bring up is the idea that, the consumer can choose their favorite control interface, which maybe even makes the idea that you would have just kind of one home service provider that sits on top of all the connected products, and the service, you would get a bunch of different services from that one kind of entity. But then also you have maybe one company you're relying on to the home support. Maybe they're different entities. One real quick question to you, Ronan. Are your agents all low voltage, or are you also pulling in electricians or plumbers or skilled trades, right, for those devices that might have those higher level needs?
Yeah, I would say 80% were low voltage.
Yeah.
That's mostly the requirement. But we also tap into, a licensed electrician as needed for, a floodlight maybe, or we also, Looking at Rebecca here, scoping, EV to the home. We know that it's also a pain point, currently today. So can we go in that market, provide predictable pricing the way we do it on OnTech for all the other services? So that's something we're scoping as well.
Awesome. Well, Greg, I'd love to come back to you and then to Alan. Greg, tell us a little bit more about how your customers are relying on you to see more about the end user and support them better. If there's differences in the insights or the segments of the end user, and especially for the smaller provider, right, who might not have the capability to do some of this work themselves, right? How does that work into the service that you're providing to your business client?
No, absolutely. And core to Calix, as far as our offering to the service providers, well beyond hardware, there are three primary SaaS applications that we drive today. The first one is Support Cloud, and Support Cloud allows our service providers to really understand what's going on in the either residential home network or the small business network, as Ron alluded to, right? That's a huge area of growth for us as well. But in the small business thing, where the Support Cloud actually allows a service provider to dynamically understand what's going on in the network and actually solve problems before the consumer even knows they're there. Most people, as we all know, don't really know the difference between internet and Wi-Fi, right? And so most consumers most of our customers prior to implementing our Support Cloud tools, they had a 60 to 70% of all calls to their call center were based on Wi-Fi troubleshooting issues, because the service provider typically did not have visibility into that home. This is traditionally why a lot of service providers get bad overall scores from an NPS perspective, because most people don't understand, right? They call their service provider, they hear click, 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 and they're like, yeah, we tested to your modem or the side of the house and it works fine. Thanks and have a nice day. Support Cloud has the tools to dynamically look at the network, change channels automatically, and actually eliminate potential issues before the consumer even notices them, right? These are similar tools that like the Comcasts of the world and large providers might have, but a service provider that just is deploying 500 or 600 customers, they have no ability to do this, right? Support Cloud gives them that ability. Secondarily, a second pillar is our Marketing Cloud solution. And that is a true behavioral analytics platform. Again, these are all SaaS applications that sit on on the service provider's network. But Marketing Cloud allows the service provider to better understand their customers, what they do in the home. Are they work from home customers? Are they heavy gamers? What kind of usage do they use on a regular basis? And really find the right solutions to target the right kind of customers. Even more importantly, recently at our show, we just announced and launched our partnership with Claritas, which is our Marketing Cloud Professional Edition. So now a service provider can go even further and identify their entire market by zip code and customers that are not even them, and allows them to market the right solutions to them around social media monitoring for parents, for kids, whether it's connected cameras around for Arlo, device protection around Serverify, or other services that are going to be valuable, Smart Biz IQ, that are going to be valuable to the end user. So there's a lot of tools that we provide in the background for our service providers to take advantage of that really allow them to support that customer in a meaningful way and provide a great experience.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned, or I can back you up a little bit here about how ISPs tend to have low NPS scores. So Net Promoter Score is a common, measurement of customer satisfaction. I think it might have something to do with the monopoly that a lot of people are under, right? That, it's a very necessary, almost utility service, right? But people in general don't give them great scores. At the same time, they're dropping bundles, right? We see all sorts of news around the ISPs, and they really are in a very, dire straits to make sure that they're retaining their customers. And so Alan, I'd love to turn to you here about, if you can tell us a little bit about when we think about services, customer retention, right?
is key to like making a subscription model work. And if you can share with us a little bit about how you see best practices for retaining customers and what you're doing. You know, you shared some nice metrics about that 80% that you're trying to get to being resolved remotely, you know, is really impactful. What other kind of tactics do you see as really impactful for, you know, your customers and trying to retain their and even upsell, right, their existing subscribers?
Sure. Most customers kind of have a certain satisfaction level, right? And when something goes wrong, then that satisfaction level drops, and their propensity to churn and their propensity to buy, so propensity to churn goes up, propensity to buy something else goes down. And the longer it takes for that provider to get help, or that customer to get help and that problem to be fixed, the more resilient they are to the overtures of the provider, and the more amenable they might be to a competitor coming in and taking their business. So there's two things. The customer wants the provider, they're annoyed that the provider's service that they pay for doesn't work to start with, right? Where the product or service, they're just annoyed, right? I pay for this, it's not working, I'm annoyed. They want it fixed as quickly as possible, or they want it taken off their hands as quickly as possible. And what they don't want is to be in a recurring situation where they have to constantly ring in and dial back and pursue Chase and Harry to get the service they deserve and they're paying for. And so most providers do a really poor job of that. Like, there's not many in the market that are really, you know, unburdening their customers from support issues. Like, they see it as an operational cost, when actually, when done well, it's a massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity to kind of regain the customer's trust and make them more acceptable and make them more sticky as a long-term customer. And from my perspective, digital care, because its immediacy and its effectiveness, is a massive part of that equation. So that's sort of what I see.
Now, we did have a question specifically around diagnostics. So Alan, just wondering if you had an insight on this one about if there's any specific insights or diagnostics that you see that are particularly valuable in kind of what they provide, and or maybe even surprising that they surprise you with the value that they provide, that they really kind of outweigh others, you know, that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, earlier we had a question about the opportunity for providers, a single provider in the home. And so what's interesting to consider in this, and with that question, and I'll kind of segue to this question, is that the operating margins of connected products are super thin, right? So they make products, they ship products that typically have very, very low margin. And when you connect those products, the cost to serve those products goes up, yet the price they're charging, you know, kind of stays static, and they have to build a cash flow model or subscription model that lasts into the future. On the other side, ISPs are selling products that have high margin and invest a lot in their customer care. So the opportunity for providers to potentially partner with connected product manufacturers to do their care for them, I think is pretty significant. And I think given the margin imbalance between the ISP industry and the traditional appliance industry, I think that's a pretty interesting opportunity. I think in terms of interesting diagnostics, the key diagnostic is the health of the network, and that's again why the ISP has such a kind of premium role to play in the home, because they own the LAN, and typically they own the WAN, and they typically count the LAN, and that is fundamentally the thing that goes wrong most often, right? And so you're looking at things like RSSI signals, you're looking at uploads and downloads and latency and concurrency. There's a breadth of different things that can go wrong. I mean, when someone says I have a problem with my network, or I can't watch my show, there are 30 different possible outcomes. It could be that Netflix isn't up. It could be you haven't paid your last bill. It could be that your device is too far away from your router. It's a myriad of things, and trying to unpick what it is a super important thing to do. It can be done digitally with all the diagnostics, but I wouldn't say there's one diagnostic that matters over others. I would say that the diagnostics associated with the network are probably the most powerful and most effective. And one last thing, it's not just the diagnostics, it's the customer. Who are we helping, and how do we help them? So it's all well and good to know the various metrics, but to help my mother, I'm going to need to know that it's my mother, right? And that she has certain technical capabilities and competences, etc.
You're on mute, Jennifer.
I think you're muted, Jennifer.
Okay. I'm no longer muted. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I was saying great insight packed into that bit of commentary. Thank you so much, Alan. And I'm going to actually have Miriam wrap us up here and bring it over to her on business models, because you were making a great point there about how, the margins are really slim on products, and looking at how, you can have some of these other entities, take on the services role. It's all about trying to make the business model work. Where does the money work out with the costs that are coming in? And in the multifamily space, that's really kind of particularly interesting. So would just love, Miriam, if you have any kind of last thoughts on determining the right business model for your customers, and whether or not you even have to customize business models depending on the segment that you're going to or the type of customer you're working with.
You absolutely have to know who your audience is, what the problem is that we're solving with technology. In terms of business models, though, I do really feel we're going to see a wave of technology packages being bundled with different services, because often there's these individual line items that keep coming up for different services. And if you can provide a technology package that you can sell as an amenity and then have good margins for that ROI on there, I do think that that's going to start penciling better. But if you look at like the sister verticals of multifamily, assisted living, student housing, the business models there's actually a better ROI, because in student housing, they charge per bed for those services, as opposed to traditional multifamily that's per unit. So when you start looking at like, where should I focus my energy? I don't want to take away the focus on any vertical, but making sure that you understand what that value proposition is for those different sister verticals, because there is a number that makes sense for everybody. And it might not always be the NOI, right? It might be recouping the cost of savings for investing in that technology package. And then really defining what you want to build. You have to be able to have flexibility in what you're offering. One size doesn't fit all. You can have an idea and a foundation of what a tech package should look like, but you might have a demographic of people who don't even have a smartphone. So being able to have a flexible solution and knowing that there's a customized aspect to any service that you're offering is going to be really imperative to the success of those different verticals.
Wise words to end on. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Greg, Alan, Ronan, and Rebecca for sharing your insights with our audience today. We really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, next up is our last virtual Connections US session of the year, which is on November 10th. Focusing all on tech innovation and new partnerships. So please come and join us for that last session. And also, of course, looking into 2023, we invite you to attend any of Parks Associates events, whether it be Connections Summit at CES. We will be hosting our co-located official partner day Connections Summit at CES, as we traditionally do in person, with Parks Associates networking reception afterwards. So we hope to see you all there. Smart Energy Summit, Future Video, which actually we have coming up in person in December in Los Angeles, Connected Health Summit, and our inaugural year for our new event all around smart spaces, focusing on apartments, hospitality, and community living, and the role that technology and connected services plays in those spaces particularly. You may know that Parks Associates, in addition to the research that we publish and produce, also offers custom marketing services like white papers, webcasts, and podcasts that are all built on our research to give an independent voice to different interesting topics for our readers. So if you're interested in any of our custom marketing services, you can reach out to Ashton. Please reach out to Jason if you're interested in Parks Associates research. And if you're interested in speaking at a Parks Associates event, Mindy Sue is your go-to. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.